Morning everyone, welcome back to the shed for the first of my autumn videos. It's been a while since I've posted one on here. With some holidays, it's all been a bit busy and a bit fraught, so haven't been able to do anything. Been away twice, so tried to fit them in, but just couldn't do that with work. So this is the first one back after the summer break. I hope you've all had a good time if you've all been away as well. It seems like it's gone extremely quickly, that 6 weeks. Bonkers. So I thought I'd do a quick video today and a catch up on what I've been working on the Harrier conversion. There's plenty to tell you about, so thought I'd go through that a little bit today, just give you a quick update. A lot of you will probably have been watching these updates on my Facebook page, so you'll have seen plenty of this nonsense, seen how it's gone over the last 4 months, I think it's been, since I started working on this thing. So where we are now is that I have a very large model, this thing here. So as you can see, the rear part of the airframe is complete. All of the tail conversion is all done and finished off. Wings are in place. It's also been cleaned up as much as I can so far. There's still quite a way to go on this. The fit of the Airfix Harrier is really poor these days. Oh god, it's so bad. So you end up having to fight every single joint, and anybody that's going to build this kit, even if you just want to build a GR1 or a GR3 or a Sea Harrier from the sort of the basics that Airfix supply, you're going to be in for a bit of a fight with this unless you get an original issue. If you get an original issue from 1970 dot, you may be okay, but the later issues are really starting to show their age now, and mould wear and the soft plastic isn't helping. So this thing has had to be very carefully assembled up until this point, and all of the joints across it have had to be lined up, reinforced and then filled. There's a lot of filler on this, mainly white milliput that I used around the back of the tail. That's been used around everything else as well. It's been used around the wing joints because it's rock hard and it binds perfectly to the plastic. It has allowed me to kind of smooth things out. So you can see here as well, along with the tail section, I've actually torn the wings away. When I spoke to Nick Greenall about this and I examined his Sea Harrier, he'd mentioned about the control surfaces and how the control surfaces didn't really look accurate in the kit, especially these inner flap sections here. They just look like they're panels, they're scribed, and although I added an awful lot of additional scribing into that area, I just couldn't get them to look real. I certainly couldn't get them to look like separate pieces. So what I did was, yesterday I cropped those sections out, and then I've lined the rear of the wing with thin evergreen strip to give it the impression of a thin aluminium panel. These are setting now. I'll reinforce them with super glue underneath, and then what I'll do is I'll cut out the slots for the guides on the top of each of the flaps, and then I'll put the flaps into place. I've actually got those over on the side of the bench here. These are the removed sections, and they at the moment are being cleaned up. I've filled them with some of this Mr. White Putty R, which I've used on this model as well. I really like this stuff actually. It's extremely smooth, and when you sand it into the surface it blends in beautifully. Probably my favourite putty at the moment actually. So I've got these sections, these removed sections. Hopefully I'll get those into place today, reinforce them, and then see if I can get them to look the way that they are. And then outboard of those sections are fuel dump pipes, and then I'll finish the wing off here with the ailerons. Hopefully that'll look a lot better than it did in the kit. Really wasn't convinced. I didn't want to add another layer of work onto this model, but kept on looking at it, thought it looked poor. So while I was away, thought about it a few times and just thought, nah, just tough it out and redo it. So that's what I've done, as you can see. So big old chunk of model. Along with the rear fuselage, I've also worked on the nose as well. That's starting to come together. I've added the the nose for the T2, I've put that back into place. I'd cut this away to allow the resin laser nose for the T4 to be built, but as you might remember from the early videos, I'd actually changed mid-flow and decided to do a T2 rather than a T4. So far I've got the nose, and also I'm now working on the mould for the vac form canopy, which sits on top of there, as you can see, looking kind of okay. Not too worried about the fit of this, although it's, you know, it fits reasonably well onto there because the canopy will be open, so I don't need to worry about blending all of this into there and it being a perfect fit. As long as it looks like the right shape, I'll be happy with that. So far I've got a big block of plastic card. I made a skeleton out of plastic card, and then I filled the ribs in with Isopon P38 car filler and let it go hard. It is rock hard now, and the white that's on the top of it, that's white milliput that's dealing with some of the issues. Kind of looking at it this morning, I'm starting to think that it might not be blown enough, so I think I may well add some more milliput onto that so that it blows that canopy out very slightly. I've got a while to work on this and I'll keep perfecting it. Then the idea is, once everything's shaped, I'll mask off the glazing on this piece and I'll build up all of the framing with filler primer and Alclad's high build primer, remove the masking, and then hopefully I'll have a raised section where it looks like there's some framing, and then it'll be vac formed. The other thing that'll be vac formed as well is the centre section here. There's a piece that goes in, it's like a mini windscreen that sits in the middle of this section, so that'll be vac formed, and I'm going to do that in one single piece, vac form it in clear plastic and then mask the base off and then blend it into the rest. I think that's much easier than trying to build the platform and then add the glazing. I'll do it in one section, and I'll use this probably as my kind of profile to make sure that it looks correct. Rest of this week will be taken up by building the remaining cockpit detail in this, and then hopefully I can get some painting done. I've been building this thing now for the thick end of 4 months and I haven't added any paint to it yet, and I'm starting to really struggle with the idea of just constantly building and filling, sanding, building, filling, sanding, and I really need to start putting some paint on this. I want this section to be kind of painted within the next 2 or 3 weeks and fitted to the front of the fuselage here, and then I can get those intakes finished. Speaking of which, the intakes are an absolute nightmare on this model. They're probably the worst single aspect of the kit. They don't really replicate the way that Harrier's intakes look at all. Inside here there is the fan for the front of the engine, and that's supposed to blend in with the front walls of the inner intakes, but the way that Airfix has modelled it is one single section that goes from the lip of the intake all the way through to the fan. So when these auxiliary doors here drop down, all you see is the internal wall of the liner. You don't see the turbine blade. So I've had to rebuild the inside of the intakes and also the inside of here, so that when the intakes are put into place and they're fitted on and you see them from the front, you actually see what looks like a smooth transition, but when you see them from the side and the auxiliary doors are dropped, you'll actually see the turbine blade through the holes. So that's been a lot of work and a lot of head scratching to try and work out how that looks. Not completely convinced that it looks exactly the way that it does on a real Harrier, but I think it's close and I'm happy with that. If I carry on constantly tweaking this model, I'm never going to get it finished. I have to draw a line under it somewhere, and I have to work out a way of making it look as good as I can and as close as possible in the time that I've set for myself. So those are the intakes. Put the nose back up on there. The other main section of this, and one of the defining features of this particular T2, are the ferry tips that extend the wings, but also 3 30-gallon ferry tanks that were carried by this particular aircraft on the day that I'm modelling it. From what we can see, there are very few photographs of T2s with these large tanks and those ferry tips. In fact, I can only think of one in-service T2, and that's the one that I'm modelling. There are pictures of the prototype. I think GVTOL has got, there are some photographs of that with ferry tips, but with the extended tail. This won't have the extended tail. This has got a stock T2 tail, the lower version, but it does have the 330 gallon tanks. Now this is where some technology has been brought into the building of this model, and something that I've really enjoyed seeing come to fruition. A chap by the name of Tim Perry has helped me out. Tim has become a real kind of confidant in this model, and also somebody that's helped me to explore other possibilities away from just simply building something from scratch using raw materials. We've used, in this case, we've used computer design, we've used some milling machines, very high grade resin and aluminium profiling board that we can use to cut moulds using CNC machines, but also have used 3D printing as well to create these. So initially what Tim did for me was to design the tanks using the photos that we had and the drawings that we had as well. He then went to guys over in Norfolk who were restoring a Royal Navy T4, and they have 2 ferry tanks that are part of their restoration. So he kind of phoned them up and said, you know, do you mind if you run a tape measure over these tanks? We're looking to make them. And they did that. They ran the tape over, gave him accurate measurements of the length of the tanks, the width of them, diameter, the size of the fins, measured everything on them, and sent him a little sketch which he used to create the parts that I've built for the model, which means that these ferry tanks are accurate. They're not just kind of us guessing at dimensions. They are accurate pieces that go on this model, and probably the first time that these ferry tanks have been accurately reproduced for any model or any kit. So really proud of these and really pleased, and also really grateful to Tim for working in his spare time on these to create them. So what he originally did is he created a pattern, put it into the computer, and then cut me a set of perspex skeletons. These perspex pieces here were cut with a laser cutter that followed the plot lines that he programmed in, and it gave me this. This is an original kind of skeleton tank for the model. This gave me an idea of how big they were, but also allowed me to check on the model how the tanks would look and where they were positioned, and if they looked dimensionally correct against the model that I was building. So once I had these, Tim then used that data to cut vac forming patterns, female moulds, out of profiling board. Now this profiling board is a dense material, and it's a mixture of resin and aluminium powder, and what it does is it creates a fully porous vac forming mould, which means that when you put the plastic over the top of it and draw air onto it, it draws air through the mould, which means that you don't have to have it on a bed with holes in, and also have holes running through the moulds that creates those little pips that you may well have seen on a vac forming pattern. It creates a perfect reproduction of the CAD data that was used to cut the pattern in the first place. And what that's resulted in are these. These are 330 gallon ferry tanks in 24 scale for the Harrier build. They're perfect. They are perfect dimensionally. They're also look fantastic under the model. I mean, they give you an idea of how big these things are. Is if you pin these into place, if I can find the holes without my glasses, you can see how big they are once you put them into place. You can see there that they are really huge pieces on the model, but I'm convinced that with everything else in place, with the location points that the guys over in Norfolk supplied us, they also supplied us with where the mounting brackets were on the top of the tanks and where those mounting brackets clipped to the underside of the pylon. So I've also measured this, so I'm convinced that these pylons are also in the right place, so that means they're in the right place on the underside of the model as well. This is a kind of an exciting development, not only for this build in particular, but for me personally, because it opens up possibilities for builds later in the year and also next year, and opens up the possibility of a full scratch build that may use some of this technology. I'm in the process of talking to Tim about some ideas for next year, where we may well use these kind of things. You can see that the parts themselves were vac formed in, I think this is 1mm plastic card. The tails themselves were 3D printed. I've also got a set of laser cuts parts for the tail fins, but in the end we used the 3D printed because they'd already got the front and rear edges of the fins beveled away, which meant I didn't have to sand them too much. I've added detail onto this. You can't see it in here, it's impossible to see in just with the white plastic card, but these have been fully scribed, and also the brake points were measured, and so the joints between the nose, mid and tail sections have been scribed in, and I've also then scribed in and punched in the holes that run around the circumference of the tank, and put in screws and sort of rivet detail around there as well. So they're complete. These are all done. Pylons are all complete as well. The only thing that will need to be added to these once they're painted, and I won't do it until they're painted, are the braces between the pylon and the tank. So those will be built up. I may well have to build a couple of those and cast them in resin. I haven't worked out how I'm going to do those yet. That's they're sort of a complicated little screw design that fits onto there. But I won't glue those into place until the tanks and the pylons are joined, because I need to make sure that those braces actually sit perfectly on top of the tank. So that'll be done. So there we are. That's where the model sits at the moment. We're now into the beginning of September. I think, what is it, the 5th or 6th of September today? We're now into the beginning of September. This model has to be finished and sat on my desk the week before the National Championships, which are 11th, 12th, 13th of November. So I now have only around 2 months to finish this off. I'm kind of on course to do that if I focus and concentrate on it. And if I can get everything joined and I can get the airframe together in the next 2 or 3 weeks, that means I can then complete the airframe, add all of the finer details, complete my rescribe, and then start to paint it. At the moment, Mal Mayfield from Miracle Masks is helping me out with some masks for the larger markings, and also the 20 squadron marking that's going on the nose. He's kind of working on that as well. So hopefully those will start to come through in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Painting it is going to be an interesting experience. It doesn't fit in my spray booth, so this is going to be the first time a model like this is going to be painted outside of the booth, and I think the logistics of painting something that's the thick end of 2.5 feet long in here might be an interesting one. But I've got all of the paint sorted out, so with a bit of luck it should be kind of okay. I'm thinking that painting this model will be an absolute breeze compared to building it, so I'm looking forward to doing that, and looking forward to having it sat on the bench complete. So I hope you enjoyed this update. Hope you've enjoyed seeing the new parts, and that you join me again next time for another update on my Harrier T2 conversion. In the meantime, have a great day, and I'll speak to you soon. You take care. Bye now.